Yeah, this is Carlos again, and today's topic will be the economy, the deficit, money. I'm going to make this in plain English, so your average Joe can understand it. Call it economy for dummies or deficit for dummies, whatever you want to. But I want to explain how this is working, how we got in this big mess, and why, and how they're keeping us in a big mess. Let's talk about starting with the deficit. We have a $20 trillion deficit. How does that happen? Well, everybody knows Congress keeps borrowing money we don't have, and they keep printing it. Well, how do they print money? They don't actually print it. What they do is we have this Treasury. We have the Federal Reserve, and then we have the Treasury. The Federal Reserve is really not part of the government. Most people understand that. It's an appointed thing. It's like an entity all on its own. The Treasury prints the money, probably at the direction of the Federal Reserve. But the way we print money is they do it digitally. And so, like every month, we have this thing called a bond auction. They sell treasuries, and the treasuries, they sell billions of dollars in treasuries. Now, it used to be, the way it was supposed to work years ago, and the way it did work, is we would have these bond auctions in it, and in the beginning, Americans bought the bonds. You remember the thing, buy bonds, support the war, that kind of thing. Us old timers remember that kind of thing. And so Americans would buy bonds. You'd buy T-bills or treasuries, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000. Jumbos were 100,000, and you'd make interest on them and so forth. Sometimes they'd call them in early, whatever. And then over time, other countries would buy our bonds. Like, back in the 80s, I think the Japanese were buying up all our bonds. The Japanese were buying all our real estate and our bonds, and everyone thought they were buying the United States. There was a big boom going on in Japan. Well, most people know how that turned out. The whole thing, the Japanese situation was pretty corrupt on its own, and it collapsed, and we ended up getting our bonds back 10 cents on the dollar, and our property. They bought Pebble Beach, they bought Rockefeller Center, all these things. We ended up getting them back like 10 cents on the dollar, and they've never recovered. They've never recovered from that. It's been 20 or 30 years, or more. It's been more than 30 years. And their interest rates went to zero like ours are now, and they've never been able to recover from that. In fact, I think their interest rates now are actually negative, which means if you want to put money in a Japanese bank, you got to pay them. Who's going to do that? I put my money in the mattress before I did that. In fact, I put my money in the mattress now at 0.1% or 1%. It's not even worth having it in the bank, at the risk that they may not be there when you need it. That kind of thing. The insurance is only so much. I mean, the insurance is $250,000. A lot of people have a net worth of more like $1 million or $2 million just in their real estate. So, that's not really in the bank. But point is, if you have $1 million 401, retirement fund, you just can't leave it in the bank and be secure because you're only covered at $250,000. And at a brokerage firm, the situation's even worse. But I'm not here to talk about that kind of stuff. I just want to talk about the deficit and how we're spiraling into oblivion. We're already there, actually. So we have this treasury auction every year, or every month, that they sell bonds. And what it's evolved into now is just a giant farce. It's probably, I think it's illegal what we're doing. Is for a while there, lately, in the last, say, 5 or 10 years, the Chinese were buying our bonds, and the Japanese, after they quit buying them, they collapsed. And the Chinese became very strong, and then they were buying our bonds. A lot of Americans today believe that the Chinese own all our bonds. It's not true. They don't really own very many of our bonds. I'm going to say, that's 5%. I'm just guessing. They don't own very many bonds. There's this thing called quantitative easing that's been going on for over 5 years, and that's what it is we're buying our own bonds. And that's like you loaning yourself money. It should be illegal, and it probably is. The Treasury prints the money digitally, and then we have the bond auction, and miraculously, the Federal Reserve buys the bonds, right? They were doing that for years. That was called quantitative easing. And the reason they did that was because they had to do it because we couldn't afford to have interest rates. I mean, interest rates are like, what? They're 0% at the bank, at the Fed window. That's the rate from the Fed window directly to the banks at like 0. So they get free money. I'll get into that in a minute. But up for you and I think we get like 0.1%, 0.1 or 0.01% if we put money in a bank, like in a money market or so. We don't really get anything. you know. And then when they want to loan us money, of course, we got to pay a much higher rate and everything. I think, you know, even though home loans are at 3 and 4 and 5% or whatever, they're pretty low. Some even 2.5, whatever. That's still, you know, 250% higher than the Fed rate, you know, for the banks. But the point is, so they did the quantitative easing, and this went on for quite a few years. And then Chinese and other people were really angry with us because every time we did that, that would devalue the dollar, and it would help us with the trade deficit, but it would hurt them, and they didn't want us to. That's called monetizing the debt or something. And the Chinese just didn't like it, you know, and they were doing the same thing actually, and we didn't want them to do it, and it was kind of a tit for tat thing going on for a while. And so then we made a promise. We kind of got forced into a corner in the U.S. and we said, well, no more quantitative easing. I think it happened under Obama. I can't remember exactly when, but all I know is we supposedly said we're not going to do any more quantitative easing. And then everyone got, you know, I believed them. You know, I went and shorted bonds for a while because I thought interest rates would have to go back up, and I lost my ass on that because they keep doing these hat tricks. I call them hat tricks. They do them every month. The hat trick they started doing after they said that, they had the bond auction. The next bond auction, I was paying attention, and miraculously the bonds, you know, they weren't supposed to sell because nobody was there to buy them, right? But they sold. They all miraculously sold, and then the business guys, the new business news, you know, news business and all that started reporting that it looked like some Belgian bank bought all the bonds. You know, well, the Belgian bank doesn't have any money. They don't have $10 billion to buy bonds with U.S. bonds. You know, obviously, you know, the money at the time they weren't tracing the money. They couldn't figure out where the money came from, but everybody knew that was coming from the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund or something like that, but really being channeled from the Federal Reserve to the Monetary Bank to buy the bonds. So we were really still doing quantitative easing, only sneaking it through some Belgian bank to make it look like a foreign country bought it. You know, and I think we've been doing that ever since, or something like it. Now, I lost my butt when I shorted the bonds because of that, and thinking that, you know, things were going to come to a head. That was probably 5 years ago. And anyway, in the meantime, you know, we've just been going on and on with the low interest rates. The reason they can't let the interest rates, you know, go back up even 1 or 2 points is because the minute that happens, the second that happens, we cannot service the national debt. The interest on the national debt is so high that it needs to be like 0.1% or 1%, or we can't pay it, you know, for the current tax revenues or current budgets. You know, we only have like 60% of our working force working right now, you know, paying taxes and all that. You know, I think the workforce is 90 million or 100 million in the United States, which is about a third of all the people in the United States. I think we have 337 million population right now. I think that the workforce is around 95 to 100 million, and only like 60 million people actually working. You know, and I think some of those are part-time. I can't remember if that includes part-time or not. It doesn't matter. It's pitiful. You know, we have an aging population, but that's not even the problem. The problem is we have a lot of people on disability and entitlement programs, and you know, and unemployed people who didn't go back to work. But and so all these people ended up on food stamps and some kind of assistance, and they've learned how to exist on the government checkbook. You know, and this is what the Democrats love. They love everybody either on a government job or a government entitlement program, so they can stay in power and stay, you know, keep their jobs and stay elected. So kind of that's how money works. That's why we have such a big deficit. And now that we've had all these disasters this year, this is 2017. Today is October, what? I forget what. It's October 5th or something. And anyway, yeah, we've had all these disasters. We got these two or three, 4 hurricanes come through, wipe out Houston, Florida, Puerto Rico. We've got these massive fires all over the place, Northern California, Montana, the Midwest, and we've got flooding and other things going on. We've had some pretty big disasters going on in the United States, as well as like the earthquake in Mexico, and then other things that were just, all this money's going out, you know. So I think I did some quick math in my own head, and I think the deficit's going to get hit by another trillion just from that, maybe another 2 trillion. So so we could end up at the deficit could end up at double what it is now. Um, I think it's 2 trillion, and we could end up at 4 trillion, or 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 something like that. Or if it's, I can't remember if it's 2 or 20, but whatever. The numbers are so big, they're staggering. And you know, it can't, you know, if you add all working people up, or every man, woman, and child in the United States, 337 million. You know, the number is a staggering number. It can't be paid back. It really can't be. And the federal deficit isn't really even really the real deficit. If you add Social Security, you know, all the entitlement programs, you know, Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff up, what's owed on it, and what's going to be paid out and owed on it, the numbers start, and corporate debt and things like that, all these debts and civic debts. I heard the number was 80 trillion dollars that's owed out there, and it just doesn't exist. You know, just so what does that mean? You know, that means at some point, you know, the system will just cease to function, and the government knows this, and anybody who has any brains knows this. That there's a point where this just can't work this way anymore. So but they keep coming in with the hat tricks to keep it going. They want everyone, you know, they want to get reelected. They're only worried about the next 2 years, next 4 years to get reelected, not really the long-term consequences of what we do with the spending and everything. And so that's why that keeps going on and on. I don't know when it's going to stop. I keep thinking we're right near the end. These disasters could be what breaks our back, and then what has to happen is the currencies have to collapse, because every currency in the world is that fiat currency. If you know what that is, look it up if you don't know. But fiat currencies are currencies that aren't backed by anything. You know, our currency used to be backed by gold. That's another story. We talk about gold all day long, but so we're not backed by gold. We're not backed by anything. Neither is anybody else. So the currencies will collapse, and I think the hat trick at that point would be kind of like the Weimar Republic in Germany in '38. I think they just have to issue a new currency, and there'll be a lot of wealth destroyed, and there'll be a lot of pain. And the longer this goes on now, the more pain there'll be. But they'll have to reset everything with some kind of new currency, or maybe even a world currency. But and you can see kind of the signs of the new currencies trying to evolve, like the Bitcoin, which I think might be collapsing now. But the Bitcoin, because you know, they're trying to do that with the Bitcoin. And then, of course, the Japanese want their currency to be the main currency, you know, because right now it's a petrodollar currency, the dollar, which drives the entire world. And that's another discussion how that works. But you know, that's the way it's been for a long time. It's the way it is right now, and that's why the dollar is so strong and important, even though it's really worthless. It's because we're the petrodollar. You know, all oil is bought and sold in dollars by some game that we set up after the war. After World War II, and some agreement that we were very smart in setting up, the Americans. Anyway, so you know, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think in terms of being prepared for what may come with currencies and money, pay your house off, pay car off, don't owe any money, and then you can't lose your stuff. You know, you got to pay your taxes and stuff. Make sure you have enough reserve to pay your taxes, your property taxes, so you don't lose it that way. If you have, you know, multiple properties, you know, maybe sell one or two, and so you have enough cash to keep the other ones. Or, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to have a lot of money anywhere right now, a lot of cash. I personally have tried to get away from cash and having cash, because if we have a currency reset, that'll be worth pretty much nothing. You know, people that buy gold and silver, you know, that's not a bad idea, really. If you're not comfortable with that, there's other ways to go. I think silver is safer than gold, because lower denominations are easier to spend. You can buy groceries with silver. You can't buy groceries with $2,000. You know, we're going to buy $5,000 groceries with $1,000. You know, it might be worth $5,000 for $1,000, or 10 or 20. You know, an ounce of silver might be worth, you know, $1,200, and you can buy some groceries. You know, so silver may be a good way to go. I would not buy. You know, I would not recommend buying bars of anything. They're really easy to counterfeit, and in fact, they counterfeit the hell out of everything. So you got to be careful with anything you buy. But coins are pretty safe, especially American Eagle coins. You know, Eagles gold and Eagle silver, and then beyond that, there's other things you can own. You know, that you know are good in economy without currency. You know, think of what might be valuable at that point. You know, actually, guns and ammo are pretty valuable and tradable. and things like Jack Daniels, and if you got a water source, or just survival kind of stuff. A generator could be pretty valuable. Gasoline, petrol's valuable. If you know how to make bread and things like that, I mean, you might be able to survive selling things like bread or soup, or having chickens and having eggs and that kind of stuff. So, so you got to think about what is valuable in that type of economy where the money is worthless. But that's pretty extreme. But it could happen, and a lot of us think it could happen. So don't rule it out. But hopefully it won't happen in our lifetime. But it might happen in our children's lifetime. But I personally think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I'm 63. I think it'll happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I thought it would happen already, but it hasn't. And it's a hat trick that keep pushing it on. All right, next video, we'll do another subject.